A moment well done. Okay, so I'm going to be talking to you about studying in English when not a native speaker. Now, why? Why study in English? Well, a few facts and figures just to establish why. 375 million people speak English as their native language, but a much greater number, 470 million, going up to 1 billion, use it as a second language. So you're part of this growing number. So it encapsulates the globe. Anywhere in the world, you could find people operating in English. So it's the new lingua franca. And to express that, we use the Latin. So that was the other great lingua franca. Now it's English. So bye-bye Latin, hello English. Is this working? So with a growing number of people using English, the pressure increases. So more and more people are feeling the obligation to operate in English. And another interesting fact is that most people using English are using it to speak to fellow non-native speakers. So a whole new kind of English is developing, not by native speakers, but by the non-native speakers. Now, it'd be interesting for me to know, have I got any native English speakers here? Are there any near English native speakers? Near. Anybody else? Because I think I heard you speak and it sounded very English to me. No? Yeah, I was looking at this. Never mind, no, let me not embarrass anybody here. But it strikes me that just listening to the chatter, some of you are already very good at English. And I expect there's a range of levels here. Now, the other big group that's growing are the people who are using it in the academic world. So this includes you now. More and more conferences, more and more sharing of research. It's all more often it's being done in English. And of course, this opens up a fantastic wealth of knowledge to everybody. So by choosing to study in English, you're giving yourself a huge advantage later in your careers and your search for work. It will put you at a big advantage. So again, I congratulate you. So in my talk today, I'd like to talk about three things. I'd like to talk about cultural shifts and leading up to different cultural conventions in writing. But I want to talk a little bit about cultural differences to start with. Then I'd like to give you some strategies for coping with the difficulties of operating in your second language. But first, I'd like to talk to you about the sound of English. So what I mean here is that English has got a different sound, of course it does, to other languages. But most of you, I'm guessing, learnt English at school from teachers who are not native speakers. And it happens very frequently that when the person first meets a native speaker, it's a horrible shock because they thought they were good at English. They were doing well at school, they were doing so well they got to university, and now they're listening to a native, what is she talking about? So there's something horrible that happens when you have to listen to a native speaker. So far, does this ring true to you? Is it easy? Well, we'll get onto that in a second. I'd like to demonstrate, the sound of English. I'd like to demonstrate this difference in the sound of the language by focusing on two different speakers. So I've got two short video clips for you here. Perhaps Christine can help me here. So I just want you to listen to these two speakers and answer the question, are they native speakers? Have a guess, if not where they're from. And also, I'd like you to think about which one is the easiest for you to understand. Thank you.
I have spent the last years trying to resolve two enigmas. Why is productivity so disappointing in all the companies where I work for? I have worked with more than 500 companies. Despite all the technological advances, computers, IT, communications, telecommunications, the internet. Enigma number two. Why is there so little engagement at work? Okay. Why do people feel so miserable?
And now we'll listen to another speaker.
The human voice. It's the instrument we all play. It's the most powerful sound in the world, probably. It's the only one that can start a war or say, I love you. And yet many people have the experience that when they speak, people don't listen to them. Why is that? How can we speak powerfully to make change in the world? What I'd like to suggest, there are a number of habits that we need to move away from. I've assembled for your pleasure here 7 deadly sins.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any ideas? Were you listening? Yes, what would you like to say? Do you agree? Yes. Okay, French accent. Okay, do you agree? Okay, now which one was easier for you to understand? The second one? Was it? No, you completely ruined my theory. I was sure you were going to say the first one. No? Okay, forget that theory. More research needed. But anyway, what's significant is you could tell that the native speaker was the native speaker. Okay? You could tell that, and the Frenchman was the Frenchman. Was the Frenchman's English good? Yes, I don't think you could fault it on grammar, vocabulary, it's perfect. And of course the native speaker spoke in grammatically correct English. But he isn't so clear. In my opinion, there are some ways of speaking that aren't so clear. Now, forget these two speakers. Who's easier for you to understand, Professor Mondini or me? Me. The wrong answer. I was sure you were going to say Professor Mondini. Okay, I should have rephrased the question somehow. Of course, isn't Professor Mondini easier to understand than me? Many people, when they're studying English, are learning from a non-native speaker. And they study and they do very well. They get to university. Now, my background is from teaching overseas students at an English university. And the first difficulty that students have when they arrive, they're worried about all sorts of things, but the one thing they thought was good enough was their English. They get to university and they cannot understand anything that the native speakers are telling them. They used to be able to understand English in their classes with their, the teacher from their own country speaking. Come to England, they don't understand anything. It's a real shock to them. Their English was good enough to get into university. They took IELTS tests. They got grade 6 or 7 to get into university. And now they don't know what anybody's talking about. So it's a big shock to them. So this is to do with the way English people speak. Now, I'm speaking in a fairly natural way. I mean, it's an artificial situation, but my rate of speech is pretty much normal. Now, am I going too fast for you? I should ask at this point. No? We're doing all right then. A sound of English is a little bit hard to grasp at first. It's different to the way Italians speak English. It's different to the way French people speak. So you would probably be able to understand an Italian, if you're Italian, you'd probably find it easier to understand an Italian person speaking English. So what I want to do, I know we're at Padua University, it's very prestigious, and you're on a very prestigious course here. I'm going to take you back to the nursery, okay, to where you were a tiny child, and teach you a nursery rhyme, okay? Now, this is not because I think you're childish or stupid. It does have a point to it, okay? This is a children's rhyme. I'll recite it for you, okay? So I'm the first one to look stupid. 3 blind mice, 3 blind mice, see how they run, see how they run. They all run after the farmer's wife who cut off their tails with a carving knife. Did you ever see such a thing in your life as 3 blind mice? Okay? Right, you've got the words in front of you. Okay? Are we ready? Everybody together? Okay? And don't worry about feeling stupid because everybody else is doing the same thing. Okay, here we go. 3 blind mice.
3 blind mice.
See how they run.
See how they run. They all run as far as
How long have you been studying English? It isn't easy, is it? Okay? Now, it was easy for me because I'm doing something. What am I doing? Are you aware of what I'm doing so I can easily say that quickly? No? Okay. The hard ones to say are they all run after the farmer's wife. Is that right? Who cut off their tails with a carving knife. Did you ever see such a thing in your life? Is that right? Now, I'm saying that, the long one, did you ever, I'm saying that in the same time that I said 3 blind mice. So 3 syllables, 3 blind mice, takes as long as, did you ever, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 syllables, taking the same amount of time as 3. So I've squashed words together, okay? And then I'm doing other things with it, okay? Let me just catch up with myself here. Now, the important thing here is that there's a kind of beat running through. I don't know if you can hear it. Yes, you could hear. I mean, this is a rhyme, so you would expect it to have a rhythm. The other words that aren't on the beat get squashed together. Okay? So try it again. Keep on the beat. And if you look down the first column, 3, 3, C, C, all, cut, ever, 3. Those are on the beat. Okay? Don't worry about the things in between. Okay? So can we try it again? And you've got to keep up this time. All right? Okay, here we go. 3 blind mice, 3 blind mice. See how they run, see how they run. They all run after farmer, wife, cut, tails, carving knife, ever see thing, life, 3 blind mice. Okay, you did it. Okay, so you leave out these small words. Now, the important thing about English is that the important words, the information words, land on the beat, and the unimportant grammar words are in the offbeat. Okay? So this is called a stress-timed language. Now, the chances are your native language doesn't do that. Okay? So Italian doesn't do this. You put an equal stress on each syllable, but we squash syllables together. Okay? So if I just show you where the squashes happen, where we squash sounds together, they all becomes they all. Okay, so you hear one word, they all, not they all, they all. Run after. Hook. We've got a hook here. What's a hook? Who cut? They've got tough. We should have cut off. Their tails. Without carving knife. Okay, so what I was doing there was I was joining vowels to consonants. Now what happens in the next one, did you? I've actually changed the sound. I've gone from a duh and a ya to a ja. Did you? Okay, can you hear that? It's not did you, did ya, did you? And the next one, I've joined two vowels together. We find it hard to say two vowels together, so I've inserted a consonant. So it's you weather. Did you weather? And then we've got another such a thing. So the vowel joins the consonant to the vowel in your life. As three blind mice. Okay? So that's one of the reasons that native speakers are often hard to follow, but your fellow Italian speakers or French speakers, wherever you're from, are speaking English are usually easier to understand. Okay? That was what I was hoping to demonstrate. I'd like to show you a little video clip which shows that even English people can get this muddled up. Okay, so this is the name for this kind of, this way of speaking. It's stress-timed. Now then, a little bit of vocabulary here to help you understand the next clip. We've got fork handles and candles. Have you seen this clip? Do you know this? You do? Okay. So it's from a comedy show. Okay, yes.
Four candles. Four candles. Here you are. Four candles.
No, four candles.
Well, there you are. Four candles.
No, four candles. Handles for forks. Got any plugs?
Okay.
Plugs.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can see this way of joining up sounds confuses the native speakers as well. So fork handles can be confused with four candles. Okay, so that's one of the difficulties that people have listening to native speakers, and that's the problem you've got right now. Okay, so but I think you're still with me. You're not going too fast, or okay, you're doing very well. Well done. Okay, I'd like to move on to the next section of my talk, which is about culture conventions, different cultural conventions. And in particular, I'm going to be looking at cultural conventions in academic writing. Okay? So this is the next part of the talk. Right, sorry, a bit of a blank here. For this part of my talk, I'm going to be referring to work by an Australian researcher called Bridget Ballard. She worked at the Australian National University with students who weren't native speakers of English. And she was interested in the problems that they had, and her job was to try and help them solve them. If we So her specific thing was culture-specific conventions in academic writing. So there was a difference between the school and university academic levels. So students study at school and they think they know how to study, and then they get to university and they find that different things are being asked of them. So I don't know, so far you're in your first week, is that right? And have you come from school? Is that what you were doing before? Is it different to school or the same? Or is it too early to tell? What about the size? Was your school as big as this? Is this bigger? Smaller? This is bigger. Okay, so you're operating in a different way. You're probably going to have to be more autonomous, more independent, take decisions for your own learning. Whereas at school, those decisions were probably made by the teacher, and you had to do as the teacher required you. Here, you've got more autonomy, more independence, and this can sometimes be a little bit confusing for the students. I've got a chart here, which I hope demonstrates this. At school, a task might be to describe something. The way you're thinking to achieve this task is to reproduce what the teacher has told you or has maybe asked you to read. You're very directed. And the sort of questions that you might be asking are what questions? Now, at the next level, which is where you are now, undergraduate level, the tasks change. Instead of just being asked to describe something, you might be asked to discuss. Okay? You have to weigh up two different points of view. You have to do this, you have to be able to analyze. So your way of thinking is not reproductive anymore, it's analytical. And the questions that you'll be asking are why and how. Okay? Not at school, you ask the question what. So you've got different tasks and you're being asked to behave in a different way. And then if you look at postgraduate level, which maybe you will go on to, who knows, the task is different now. You're probably having to prove a proposition, and you're having to be creative, originally creative, not relying on other sources of information, but actually finding your own sources. Okay? You'll be thinking in a more speculative way. Previously, it was analytical, before that reproductive, now it's speculative. And the questions you'll be asking are, what if? So, as you go through school and then onto university, you're being asked to do different things. So you're at this transition, I expect most of you. Am I right? Have you come here from school? There isn't a craze for gap years here, is there? Where you take time out between school and university? You did, you have. And I can see one or two people perhaps haven't come straight from school. Okay, so you're going to maybe have tasks that look similar, but what you have to do with the task will be different. Okay? Okay, well, one of the things that you may find is that you have to think in slightly different ways. So on the left, I've got patterns of logic. So the first one shows a line, a dead straight line, and it moves from left to right. The second one is similar, but with a few kinks in it, okay, slight variations. The third one, a series of parallel lines, and the fourth, a spiral. Now, would you be able to guess which culture or which group or which country you could associate with these four things, four ways of thinking? or 4 different patterns of logic. Any ideas? Which one do you think is German? The first one? Okay. Yes? It's direct. Okay. Is that where you're from? Okay, so that makes sense to you. So you would put Germany in that first one, you too. Okay. What about the second one? Where might that be from? Well, why not take a moment just to talk to the people next to you and have a little discussion? So where do you think these patterns are from? Okay, or if there's nobody next to you, there's people in front or behind. Okay. If I tell you that of these 4, one is European, one is Oriental, one is English, which one have I missed out? Did I mention India? Okay, the other one's Indian. Any ideas? Which one would go with which? Sorry? Is what? The 4th one is India. Okay. Yes? I don't know if people can hear that. I'll repeat it for you. Okay, so you think that the blue one, the 3rd one, would be India. Okay, and you're thinking a bit more to do with sound patterns, I think. Okay, now I'm actually thinking more about logic, patterns of logic. What about the bottom one? Korea. So, Oriental. Okay, yes. So, you're quite right. The 3rd one is India. The bottom one is Oriental. Okay, so that leaves the top 2. Any ideas? So we've got European and we've got English. Now, some people have already mentioned that they think the first one, the linear one, is following the German tradition of logic. Okay, in which case it would be very close to the English way. All right? So the top one would be the English way, the English approach to logic. And the black one with the linear, but with some variations in it, I've simplified and called it European. But probably the further north you go, the more it's going to be like that first one, the dead straight line. So I'm talking here about patterns of logic. And the person who's I'm referring to in this section is an Australian lecturer called Bridget Ballard, and she worked particularly on things like culture-specific conventions and how it leads to academic writing. And she was working with students in Australia, and particularly to help. She was like a counsellor, an academic counsellor, and she found that students had problems coming from one country into another. And she tries to explain this. What she found was that the bottom one, the Oriental writers, did not like to go straight to the point. They liked to look at it from this side, from that side, and gradually get closer and closer to it. And of course, the lecturers didn't like the students' writing. They said, it's just going round and round the houses. What's the point you're trying to make? Where are you going with this? And when the student tried to explain, but I'm looking at it from this way, and then this way, and then gradually I'm leading the reader, the lecturer, to this point. And the lecturer says, but why? And the student says, but I can't tell you what to think. You're the lecturer. You're much higher status than me. I can't tell you what to think. I can only present these different points of view and lead you to the conclusion, but I can't tell you what to think. And that is the complete opposite, isn't it, to the first one, which is the British one. So the Indian one, you were right to say Indian, although I think the reasons are different to mine. Indians also don't like to say directly what something is. They tend to explain what something is by drawing parallels. So they'll often illustrate something with a little story rather than telling you directly. Now, the European ones, which this is a gross generalization, so I don't know, perhaps my Italian experts here can tell me, but you may fall into this group where you're going in a linear direction, but you may be able to deviate from it. You may be able to bring sources from different points of view into it. The English teacher, the lecturer, reading the European student's essay may say, but this is irrelevant. This isn't part of it. So get to the point. So the British way, or the English way, is very, very linear, very sharply focused, no deviation. So this is something facing some of you students. Now, your course is in English, but it's in Italy, and so it's within the Italian culture. But the texts that you read will be in English, and those will probably be written with somebody with this logical way of thinking. So you will perhaps become familiar with it. But this perhaps is more important for any Oriental students or people from a different background, where their patterns of logic are not so linear. You will need to make an adjustment in your writing. Okay? So it's a point for you to consider at university, where your tasks are less directed compared to the way you were at school. You may have to make these kinds of adjustments. Okay? So it's important for you to know the cultural situation that you're in. Right, is that all I wanted to say on that? Okay, so my next section is going to be on study skills. Before I move on to that, do you need a break? No? No, we can carry on, because we've got the last lecture slot of the day, have we? So let's move on. Okay, good. Okay, so that's the explanation. The English way, the European, although this is a great simplification, and some people already have recognized the German one as possibly being similar to the English. Okay, so now I'd like to move on to study skills. So study skills are very simply reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So these are the skills that you need when you're studying. And I'm going to be talking about all four of these. Yeah, so let's start with the reading. Okay? So I want to give you some suggestions for reading as a non-native speaker. Okay, the task has suddenly got absolutely immense. So what you need to do is to read actively. Now, people think that reading is a passive skill, along with listening, okay? Is it passive for you? This is a dangerous state of mind, to be in a passive state. So you need to keep it active. And you can keep reading active by asking yourself questions. So you've got a topic you have to read about. Now, when you're reading in your own language, you will have all sorts of efficiency strategies. And the minute you start reading in another language, you will almost definitely start using very, very arduous techniques like word-for-word reading, which you probably don't do in your own language. Okay, but in the difficulty of another language, people go right back to the beginning and start reading word by word. Now, I know in UK universities, the amount of reading you have to do is huge. Is that the same here? You don't know yet, but probably you're going to do a lot more reading than you've done before. So you need to have strategies for dealing with it. And not only that, you're now going to be reading in English. So the whole thing gets an awful lot more difficult. So you need to, before you start reading, just a few little tips for you. Before you read on a topic, ask yourself what you already know about it. Then ask yourself, what do I think I know about it? And then, what do I not know about it? Then when you read the text, it will be a lot easier for you to follow. So bear that in mind, and don't just passively let the words wash over you. This will not help you at all. So active reading. The other thing is top-down reading. Now, people tend to read when it's not their first language. They start reading word by word, and you've got to try and get away from this, okay? It will be rather like, hang on, pushing a boulder up a hill. You're making the task immensely difficult for yourself. This is reading word by word. What you need to do is, oops, sorry, went the wrong way. Make it a downhill. Okay, just slide your way down. Okay? So there are techniques for doing this. And I'm going to give you a text now, and I'm going to see if you can employ some suggestions. Okay? So I don't want you to read word by word, okay? I'm going to give you 5 seconds to tell me what the topic of this next text is. You've got 5 seconds. On your marks. Get set. Go. Okay. Tell your partner what you think the text is about. You don't have to tell me. Whoever's near you. Okay? Right, did you and your partner agree? Yes, agreement? And anybody who didn't agree with their partner? Okay, you're going to look at the text again and see if either one of you is right or you're both right, however it was. Okay, do you think you're right? Whatever you think the topic was? You think you're right? Okay. What is the subject area? Okay, so you're here to study psychology, but I'm here to talk about studying in English. So this could be a text from any discipline at all. So let me narrow the choice for you. The choice is geography, history, or biology. So which one do you think it is? Geography. Anybody else? Okay. Read the text again and tell me what you think which subject area it is. Okay, any offers? I'll tell you, yes, biology. Okay? So to do that, you have to read the whole text. Reading word by word, I was just giving you a few seconds each time, will not make life easy for you. Okay, so the big rule of reading in a language which is not your own is do not read word by word. You will make that's why I had the picture of the man pushing the boulder up the hill. You're making the task very, very difficult for yourself. Okay? So think of it as the whiz down the slope. Okay? That'll make it easier for you. Now, another thing you can do to help you make the task easier is to try and find what the underlying structure is. So you're still not reading word by word. You're trying to read strategically. Okay, so here's the text again. And we're going to look at the possible structures. Okay? So here's one structure. If it's the essay, the piece of writing starts off with a problem, what would you expect the next part to be? Very good. What good students. This is why you're here, isn't it? Okay. If we have a compare, what do you think the next part will be? If the first part is comparison, what do you think the next part might be? Okay, something that's the opposite. Okay, so I would use advantage, disadvantage in another type of essay, which we'll come on to. Compare, anybody? So this is talking about similarities and the differences, okay? Compare and contrast. If we're talking about the causes of something, what's the next logical step to talk about? Well done. The pros, cons. Now this might be where we have advantages, disadvantages. That's expressed in many different ways. Okay, so grasping the text type is very, very important for you. So you're still not reading word by word, but you're trying to get an overall picture of what this text is about. So going back to the text, which one is it? Do you want to say? Compare and contrast, yes. It's comparing tropical forests with tropical seas. Okay, well done. So we're still not reading word by word. So you absolutely want to avoid that in your reading, because no doubt you have a huge amount to do, and this is going to make life much, much easier for you. And it's only when you grasp the whole structure and the basic message that you worry about the details, like in the sentence. Okay. I was just going to add a little point here that something that English language teachers love to do, and I'm guilty of this, is giving students a text and chopping it up, and then telling the student, right, now put this in order. This may seem like a totally pointless exercise. You've got perfectly good text, and now it's all in little bits. Okay? But the point is to try and help the student understand the logic in the text. And if you understand the underlying logic, you're going to be able to find your way through the different language much more easily. Okay? So try and apply strategic thinking when you're confronted with reading a text in English. And don't read word by word. You can give up right away. The amount of reading that you have to do is hard enough if you're a native speaker, but as reading in your second language or possibly third language, you're making this an impossible task. So avoid word by word reading. It won't get you anywhere. Right, I want to move on to a different... just have a look at this now. And do you agree with the student who answered that this was... what did she say? A comparison. Okay, yes. So it's comparing life in tropical forests and in tropical seas. Okay? And mostly it is a comparison, but there is a bit of contrast as well. So mostly similarities, but some differences. Okay, now this is just an extract from an introduction. Okay, now I'd like to move on to note-taking. This is not one of the main skills. I mentioned reading, writing, listening, speaking. So this is a sub-skill that's useful for you. Now, I've got some people taking notes, not terribly many. Now, I think the style of studying is changing. For example, PowerPoint presentations, and then the teacher gives handouts and the students don't have to do anything. I actually am very much in favour of the more old-fashioned way, where the student does take notes, because when you're taking notes, you're having to engage, okay? At the moment, you're sitting there and you're being passive. By taking notes, you're immediately doing something active. So I'm very much in favour of this rather old-fashioned method of taking notes. Okay, so, whoops. So this is the structure of my talk. And you can see that my notes are not going down the page, that I've made a pattern. Do you know this kind of note-taking technique? Does anybody ever take notes? Maybe this should be a history lesson on how we used to study. Okay, but my suggestion is that you do take notes, because what's happening when you do this kind of note-taking, rather than the more traditional linear notes, is that you have to think, well, where am I going to put this idea? You have to see the relationship between the ideas. Okay? So, the title of my talk, Studying English When Not a Native Speaker. We can talk about the sound of English, different writing conventions, strategies for coping. And then if I develop the sound of English, English is stress-timed, okay? So we heard that when I was talking about 3 blind mice. See how they run the or another. This is called a stress-timed language, that the important words fall on the beat. Okay? This is not how it is in Italian, where words are given more equal stress. And that's why English can be easy to understand, because we stress the important words, but also why we're hard to understand, because of all those unstressed words that get squashed together. Okay? So I started off talking about the sound of English. The stress-timed nature of it is unstressed words are hard to hear, stressed words are easy to hear. That's the good news. And sounds are linked, sounds are changed, sounds are added. Okay, so that was the first little bit of my talk where we were talking about the blind mice and possibly wondering why. Okay, so I favour this system of note-taking where you don't write down the page, but you make a pattern. And one of the good things about it is that say on a sheet of A4, you can add sound, you can add things in. If you've gone down the page, you just have to keep adding down the page. There isn't room to add information in. As you're listening and taking notes, you're having to organize your ideas. That means you're having to interpret them. So rather than listen and then write, the action goes from your ear to your hand. If you are doing this kind of note-taking, you are processing it. It's going through your brain, and it's going to make much more sense to you later, and it's going to be much easier for you to remember. So I'm a great advocate of this way of taking notes. If I just talk about my experience of studying, I went back to studying to train as an English language teacher in my 40s, and had to learn a whole new set of skills, like taking notes. But the course I did directed us. We absolutely had to take these mind map notes. And when we wrote an essay, we had to make a mind map. This is the name for this kind of note-taking. We had to mind map it and submit that with our essay. And if we didn't submit the mind map, the tutor didn't mark the assignment. So some may have cheated and written their essay and then done the map afterwards. But I followed the advice because you can be very logical in this way. Okay? So I personally am a great advocate of this way of taking notes. And it can be used to prepare for an essay. It can be used when you're listening to a lecture, preparing a talk, and all the different skills that you need in your academic studies, you can do with mind maps. So on this course, where it was compulsory to mind map, it was a year's course leading to a diploma in teaching English as a foreign language. I got the whole course, the whole year course, down onto about 12 sheets of paper. I could get so much more information in. And I could read through my notes, all of them, before the final exam. So I'm a great advocate of this system. So if you want to be an efficient student, I recommend this kind of study technique. Right. Is that enough on that? Hang on.